welcome to another episode of It's a History Podcast. I am your host, Madison, and today we'll be talking about Abigail May Alcott Nieriker. We often hear about Luisa May Alcott, but what about her sisters? Abigail May was the youngest of the four Alcott daughters born July 26, 1840, to Bronson and Abigail May Alcott. Named for her mother, she would be called Abby or Abba as a child, but when she was 23, she asked to be called May, which is what I will be calling her for the rest of the episode. May was an artist. She began drawing as a young child and continued to work on her craft as she grew up. In 1859, she attended School of the Museum of the Fine Arts in Boston when she was just 19 years old. Around 1862, May began teaching art at the Concord School that was run by Franklin Benjamin Sanborn. He was a contemporary of her father who was involved in many of the same social groups and activist parties that her father was a part of. Some of these included partaking in the abolitionist movement, being an author, as well as being a reformer. In 1869, she published Concord Sketches. This was a compilation of the sketches she had made while living in Concord with her family. From these sketches to her later work, improvement can be definitely seen, especially with her sure hand to a clever focus within the art. May would go on 3 separate European trips in 1870, 1873, and 1877, where she would fine-tune her craft. These trips were ultimately made possible with the publishing of Little Women. May had actually illustrated the first edition of Little Women. Unfortunately, her drawings had been met with negative critical reception. Little Women had first been published in 1868, and these negative reviews sort of gave May that push to work even harder for her art. Her main style of art was painting flowers, but she was also an excellent copyist of J.M.W. Turner. He painted landscapes and marine paintings. They had somewhat of a violent nature with the way he depicted nature, or water. She was also a talented still life painter in both oils and watercolor. May took her art seriously, as she should, and studied under some of the most influential artists of her time. One of the artists she studied under was William Morris Hunt. He was not only willing to teach female students, which is something not many other artists would consider at this time, but he would also give them a sense of their own worth. He learned under the Parisian painter Thomas Couture, who specialized in historical and genre paintings. Think paintings that were more of a scene or where an event was happening. She also studied under William Rimmer, who was a sculptor, but also taught sculpture through the lens of anatomy, emphasizing the importance of anatomically correct sculptures and drawings. He would focus on the musculature and proportions to make as lifelike sculptures as he could. His knowledge was based on his own experience as a doctor prior to entering the arts. This was probably one of the best people for May to learn under, as one of the critiques of her Little Woman sketches were the odd proportions of the characters and their less than lifelike appearance. They are not bad drawings, but they would not be considered lifelike. One of the primary reasons May was so successful as her career progressed was her own sense of self-worth. She was not one to shy away for calling out misogyny. She was also able to recognize that not only was she a good artist, but she was likely to have a future of fame as a hardworking artist. In between travels, when she was back home in 1875, she planned and outfitted a studio in Concord to help support and promote emerging artists in the New England area. Not everyone could afford to learn art in the land of the masters, and she wanted to provide quality instruction to those up-and-coming artists. As a well-traveled woman, she actually wrote a book titled Studying Abroad and How to Do It Cheaply. She stated that there is no art world like Paris. Traveling in Europe was where May was able to hone in her craft as a copyist. The copy she did of Turner's paintings mentioned earlier would eventually sell quite well and bring her success. The next mission would be to find success with her own original art. One of her first major successes with her original art would come in 1877 when one of her pieces was selected to show in the Paris Salon. This was a huge honor to any artist. Paris was a hub in the art world, and to be picked to be displayed was a huge milestone. Her piece was one of 2,000 out of 9,000 picked for this particular display. Not only was it picked, it was also placed in an area of the salon that was easily viewable. The art chosen was a still life of a bowl of fruits, a bottle, and a handled jar. In 1878, she married Ernest Nieriker in London. Ernest was a Swiss tobacco merchant and a violinist. He was only 22 years old to her now. He supported her art career as well as helped her through her mother's death in November 1877. After they married, they lived in Meudon, which is a suburb of Paris. In 1879, one of May's pieces was selected to be shown in another exhibit at the Paris Salon. This was major for her career as an artist. The painting was La Négresse, which depicted a black woman without the painting being focused on romance or erotica. For the time, it was common to have black people depicted in servant roles or entertainers. Rarely were they depicted in the same plane as white people. The woman in the painting appears solemn, wearing a reddish-colored head covering and a loose-fitting white top, slightly sliding down her shoulder. Her eyes are looking away from the viewer, like she is lost in thought or daydreaming. She does not interact with the viewer in any way. From looking at the painting, it looks like a moment in time. Not particularly exciting or engaging, but someone just existing in their own world, lost in thought, not worried about those around her. Soon after, May's time would come to an end. At the end of 1879, at the current peak of her career, she died due to complications due to childbirth. Her daughter Luisa May, who she named for her sister, but everyone called Lulu, was born in November 1879. 7 weeks after the birth of her daughter, she passed due to complications, most likely childbed fever, which is a bacterial infection. Her sister Luisa would raise Lulu until her own death in 1888, where Lulu eventually resumed living with her father. This was May's wish, as Ernest had traveled often for work. May's work showed an artist who was serious about her craft, and through the support of her family and eventual husband, she was able to obtain notoriety before her untimely death. It's hard to imagine what would become of May Alcott. To leave the earth just as your career is taking off, I can't imagine it. There's no telling what other original works she could have or would have produced. You can clearly see improvement of her work over time, even to the untrained eye. It will be lost to history what she could have done if she had lived. It is nice to look into the lives of people that live adjacent to those who are household names. May was notable in her own right, but without looking more into her family, I would have probably never came across her. In a weird twist of fate, I actually read a book titled The Other Alcott while researching for this episode. It's a fictional retelling of May Alcott's life, though not exactly historically accurate, gives a little nuance to who May was and her relationship with her family, primarily with Luisa. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the next one.